Because then you can tell them all the things you know, the audience, everything you know about him. But Tom Schull said if I told him some things that I know about him, that he would spend the rest of the time reciprocating. So I thought it'd be safer just stick to the notes. Tom comes from one of those far-flung parts of the United States that nobody ever hears of very much. Out like in Gary's territory, which is underpopulated. Although you were born in Kansas City, Missouri, I think you grew up, Gary said, in Idaho or Nebraska, someplace like that.
Idaho and California.
And Dr. Schull, as you may know, is a part of the Faculty of Educational Studies, and he's an educational psychologist. He went to Oregon State and did his undergraduate work. And when I was chatting with him about his background, I guessed something, partly in jest, and suggested you're probably one of those smartasses who went right from your bachelor's to your PhD, and he said yes, he did. That's a special breed of mankind. So he went to Oregon State for his undergraduate work, and then he got his PhD from the University of California in Berkeley. He's been at UB for 6 years. He's a child prodigy, and we've got a couple of delightful little girls whom I wave at once in a while on their bicycles, when they're on their bicycles, not when I'm on their bicycles. He swims and plays tennis. And the area, a lot of you have studied, or some of you have studied with him, and know some of the things that he's turned on about. And he is interested in learning models, mastery learning, and the whole area of cognitive psychology. And one of the things I think that I've noticed in auditing a couple of his courses is that he, although he's very sophisticated as far as psychological theory is concerned, he makes every attempt consistently to relate theory to practicality. So without taking any more of his precious time, I'll turn you over to Dr. Thomas Schull.
Thanks, Bud. If any time during the presentation or talk or discussion, whatever you want to call it, you have any questions or would like clarification or would like to raise a comment, please feel free to do so. I don't mind at all being interrupted, and I think that's a healthier climate for learning than when someone stands up and just lectures and everyone else listens. I want to begin by trying something. I'd like you to pick someone in the room, preferably someone that you don't know very well, and you're going to spend about 3 minutes apiece talking about yourself so that you can learn something about the other person. So I want you to talk, the first person, one of you decide who can talk first, and talk for yourself talk about yourself for about 3 minutes. Then I'll mark time, and you reverse the role, and the other person talk. Learn as much as you know. Give things that you would like the person to know, and the person who is listening, try to find out as much as you can. Learn as much as you can about the other person. So pick someone else, go off in a corner or someplace, and try to preferably pick someone that you don't know very well. That may not be possible. Maybe you all know each other very well. But
Maryland and Doris. Start now?
Yeah. Pair off, and each pair go someplace.
Should we take notes or just...
No, don't take notes. Just listen. Is everyone paired off? Okay, all right. Does everyone else have a pair first? What about, you can? You got some friends? I just want to make sure you Ellie, and the three of you here. One of you take Oh, you're just taking notes for Judy or Gary? I didn't know that. Try to work out there. Here's all this. What? You can ask questions, but just talk about, no, find out as much as you can. Learn about as much as you can. Okay, why don't you shift roles and focus more on the other person now? let's take about 30 seconds more and kind of wrap it up. Okay, if you want to kind of stay where you are, you can. I'm going to ask some of you a few questions that will give an indication of how much you learned about the other person. And there's no fair cheating on this exam. No fair looking at your partner now that so forth. You had your chance to learn. And Bud, can you tell me what kind of shoes your partner had on?
No.
No. What kind of watch did your partner have on?
Oh, that I remember. He had quite an elaborate watch because he used it in our conversation. I couldn't, it was
Well.
black dial and large.
Oh, you learned something. Good, good. What kind of earrings did your partner have? She doesn't. Oh, jeez. What kind of earrings did your partner have? I thought you people were supposed to learn something about the person you were with. You obviously didn't. But you couldn't answer my questions.
We didn't learn everything.
Okay, practice makes perfect. Let's try it again. Pick someone else this time. And we'll kind of repeat the exercise. Pick someone else. Again, preferably someone you don't know very well, but...
Edwards, come over here so we can find out what kind of earrings.
And this time, learn something, will you? Okay, why don't you shift roles now, or shift talk or listener? Okay, we'll wrap it up in about 30 seconds. Okay, let's kind of gather back in. We kind of gather back in and get in the big group. I hope you learned something this time. I mean, you were pretty dumb the first time. You didn't show any indication that you learned anything at all. Maybe this time you'll be a little bit more successful. But this time, what I want you to do, rather than me asking the questions, I want some of you to ask your partner a question about yourself that came up in the discussion that your partner should be able to answer. Is that clear? Okay. Ask a question to your partner that he or she should be able to answer as a result of the conversation you have. You want to begin?
Okay. What's a new interest that I took this year? Continuing the ed department.
Oh, I remember that.
Wow.
We were part of the first one.
Oh.
Or she thought she was psychic or something. What's an interest that I took up this year in the continuing ed department?
We can't hear the question.
What's a new interest that I took up this year in the continuing ed department? Or a course that I'm taking there? Oh, yoga. Yeah.
Okay. How about you?
Okay, before I ended up in Buffalo, one of the places was I lived.
I remember one that's North Carolina.
John, you should
New York.
What about you?
where's my undergraduate?
Okay. Well, it looks like maybe you learned a little bit more this time. But isn't the two experiences that you had what we oftentimes do to our students? We tell them to learn something without telling them specifically what to learn. We ask them questions or evaluate them on points that they may never have been exposed to. The point is that when we try to teach, a good policy, at least I have found something to be a good policy, is one, have a clear mind yourself what you want the student to be able to learn, and two, tell him what it is that you want. This sometimes goes under the term instructional objectives. That is, what's the objective of this particular unit? What am I trying to accomplish as a teacher? And then sometimes, not always, but sometimes we tend to pretend that that's secretive and we don't dare tell our students what it is that we want them to learn. We tell them just learn the material. But learning is much more effective if we can specify to the student what it is. How specific should this be? Well, the only thing that we can really use as an indication that an individual has learned something is some change in his behavior. We can't just say that, well, this person has learned without being specific. Well, we can say that, but it's kind of a useless, empty statement. So we need to focus on behavior. And sometimes, in fact, instructional objectives are called behavioral objectives. But why behavior? Isn't this dry? Isn't this not really capture the essence? That can be a valid criticism. But it's also kind of getting away from to me, the obvious fact that what we're trying to change is an individual's behavior. In fact, the formal definitions of learning, when we talk about learning, what we're really talking about are changes in behavior. So if we are concerned with teaching, and to me, teaching is an attempt to help another individual change his behavior in some way towards mutually agreed upon objectives, we need to be aware of this. Oftentimes we can't really capture the flavor of what we mean by saying creative expression or understanding the content of this article or this reading passage. But we can make it at least a beginning by saying, well, creative expression means that he's able to talk about a number of different, about a topic with at least 5 ways of elaborating or bringing other things within a period of 2 or 3 minutes. There are many other ways you could define creative expression. And the only point I'm making is that as teachers, we need to be aware of what it is we're trying to teach and to focus on this behavior. What does understand this passage mean? Does that mean he can answer questions about the theme? Does it mean he can name the characters in the story? Does it mean he can paraphrase the composition? What does he mean? Or we're teaching someone to write. What does that mean? Does that mean he can print the letters of the alphabet? Maybe that's the first stage. Or it means he can write cursively. Does it mean he can write a composition? What is it that we're trying to teach? And until we have a good idea of what it is we're trying to teach, we can't do anything. Again, I define teaching as the attempt of one individual to help another individual learn mutually agreed upon objectives. The only way we can do this is to have a clear idea of what the objectives are to begin with. Another aspect of this same objective framework, something called task analysis. Which is a fancy word, but really when you look at it, all it means is what are the components of the skill I'm trying to teach? if I'm trying to teach reading, what are the subcomponents that a person has to be able to do in order to demonstrate to me that he has, in fact, learned the objective of comprehending the theme of this story? Or before he can express himself orally, perhaps this would mean that he has to have effectively, let's say, or in a way that could be that he could be understood by his professor. That might be an objective for some of you people. In other words, can a student express himself in a way that he could be understood by his professor in the university that isn't concerned about and can't be bothered with the types of problems that you're concerned with? Well, what does that involve? Well, it would certainly involve some knowledge of vocabulary. It would probably involve some knowledge of sentence structure. And those of you who are really in the area could probably identify other things that would really be involved, that would really be components of this overall task of being able to effectively communicate one's ideas to a professor that is of a different culture and a different framework and the like from the student that you're working with. So the first thing that we have to be concerned with are the objectives. These need to be stated in behavioral terms, or they're more effective if they're stated in behavioral terms. And then some sort of task analysis in terms of what are the components of this task or skill that I'm trying to teach. What's the second thing we need to be concerned with? Well, there's a number of things we need to be concerned with in the teaching process. The objectives is just the first thing. The second, you could call it any number of things. It came into the literature with the terminology of entering behavior, which may not be a very good descriptive thing, but I picked it up and it's kind of become ingrained in me now. The concept is more important than the term anyway, but entering behavior. Where is the student now? What are his present capabilities? This might involve giving a pretest, as I know some of you do, some of you have developed pretest for your units. But it doesn't then mean, and I'm not implying that this is how you go about it, but this doesn't mean then shelving those pretests onto a shelf and then not looking at them again until it's time to take the post-test. It's saying this pretest is to be used as a diagnostic instrument. And I'm going to make certain prescriptions. It's like going to the doctor and the doctor saying, oh yes, you have influenza, and then giving you a whole batch of medicine, and then 2 weeks later you go back and say, oh yes, it's all gone, you no longer have it. It's saying you have this specific variety of influenza, this specific drug I happen to know to be effective, and therefore I'll prescribe it for you. And you as teachers can do roughly the same type of thing. I know what my objective is. I know where the student is performing now. And so I need to take this into account in terms of making prescriptions or deciding what the student has to be able to do in order to reach his objectives. Oftentimes, I think all of us as teachers, and I know I'm as guilty of this at times as anyone, tend to ignore this. But I think with a group like the group that you're working with, this is a terribly important consideration. Not only the objectives, which might be ability to function in a normal college classroom, but also where is he now? How long is it going to take me? How can I help make prescriptions? How can I help teach him specific things that will get me from here up to here? So we have the goal, we have the starting place. Then we might want to consider, how are we going to accomplish this? So we come into instructional procedures. Some of these are formal terms, kind of semi-technical terms that I use. You can also call this methods. Is how am I going to get the student from where he is now up here? Well, I'm going to have to gain his attention some way. That's going to be one aspect of it. I'm going to have to maintain his motivation. I'm going to have to do something specific that is based on what I know about learning, so some sort of incorporation of learning principles. What you're trying to do here is create an environment or create a situation that will help the learner move from where he is to where both of you want him to be. You're creating an environment. And the focus of this is more on the student than on the teacher. Oftentimes in education, maybe you haven't been as corrupted yet as some of us who have been more brought up in the traditional lines of education. I hope you haven't. That teaching is something a teacher does. Teaching is lecturing. Teaching is leading discussions. Teaching is giving homework assignments, collecting money for milk. All of these things that is kind of the role. And where is the poor student in this whole thing? Well, the poor student is kind of out there in the classroom. And there's oftentimes very little meaningful, real attempt to relate what the teacher does to what it is you want the student to learn. What do you want the student to learn? Is the starting place for me? What is his characteristics? What is his personalities? What are his affective aspects that may influence? The fact that he's failed all his life, feels a failure now, is a consideration. Taking all of these things into account, then the teacher comes in and saying, what I want to do is through what I say, through what I do, through the materials I give the student, trying to create an environment that will foster this change in behavior that we want in the student. So actually the orientation that I take towards teaching puts the focus on the student rather than on the teacher, and in that respect is different from the more traditional orientation towards education. Makes a lot more sense to me. So here we have, this is where we want him to go, this is where he is, and this is how we're going to get him there. Oftentimes, sometimes you can have specific curriculum materials or specific methods. Sometimes you have to create your own. Sometimes you realize that what you're doing is not effective and you have to change it. These are points I'm going to get to shortly. But you have to create or find or discover or be given or something, some way to help the individual get from where he is to where you want him to be. However, how do I know when he gets there? Come on, Weekly.
Yowza, boss.
Whoops.
Come on.
Me and my ideas.
Two psychologists. It's an intelligence test we both flunk.
Okay. those are the first three components of the model that I'm concerned with. The fourth, performance assessment. How well is what is the student doing? Is he learning? Is he fidgety? There are a number of ways we can look at or go about this. The way we typically think of this is in terms of evaluation. That is, you give the kid a test, and he either fails it or he passes it, or he gets an A or a B or a C or whatever the case may be. But that's only one aspect of performance assessment. Performance assessment is not synonymous with evaluation. Evaluation involves making value judgments. It involves assigning grades. It involves saying, this is good, or this is better than what Johnny's doing, or some sort of value judgment of that source. Performance assessment, in the very strict sense, is neutral. It's giving the individual, well, some sort of feedback, or maybe just reading the individual. Any good teacher does this. Oftentimes they would deny it, or they would not be aware of it, or whatever you might say. But when you're looking for indications that that the student you're working with, the students you're working with, is bored, you're assessing their performance. When you're seeing that they're having difficulty learning this specific word, you're assessing their performance. It doesn't have to be negative nor involve evaluation. Evaluation is a completely separate bag from performance assessment. Whether it's good or whether evaluation is necessary and what form it should take is something I could spend another couple of hours on by itself. Whether we should use evaluation and such. The thing is that we need to assess, and we need to be aware of the fact that we're assessing the student's behavior. Yes?
Aren't you in a way assessing your own behavior, your own approach?
I think yes, you're assessing that and kind of assessing your own procedures
Right.
and updating them. And if I see that you're bored, this may mean that what I'm saying is not relevant to you. So rather than just keep talking, I might say, well, how does this relate to what you're doing? Or do you see how this will help you when you take classes out in the main part of the university? And he may say no. Then maybe you'll have to change your objectives and work on that. So what you're doing, what you're really interested in, is the learning of the student. And you have to assess how well he is learning, or what state he is in. But in the process, you have to be open to change or modification. In fact, the next component of the model is kind of modification of procedures. So that if you see that what you're doing is successful, or is not successful, more likely, you might modify it. So you're jumping back and forth here. But on what basis do you modify it? You modify it in terms of an evaluation of what the students how the student is performing. He's becoming discouraged because this is too difficult, or he's just not getting this math problem right. He just hasn't learned the skills for this math problem yet. So you're assessing his performance, but on the basis of that assessment, you may modify the procedures that you're using. Teachers don't like to think about evaluation of what they're doing.
It's more of a problem.
Right. what teachers do is come in front of the classroom and they're kind of like God, you know, and they never, a good teacher is as much of a student as the students are. But in some, maybe somewhat of a different way. Obviously the teacher should be more experienced and more familiar with the material than the student. But he can still learn. And I find this to be the case continually. I'm learning from my students. Not only content, but specific, but to a very large extent, how I can be effective in my teaching. Then the final thing you might want to include would be modification of the system. Which would say that this would be an ongoing thing throughout the semester or throughout the course. Not only throughout the course, maybe throughout a particular unit. But at the end of the course, at the end of the semester, you go back and say, well, maybe I need to modify the whole curriculum or the whole approach, maybe with this aspect of it. Maybe I should present vocabulary before I present a consideration of syntax, rather than doing it the other way around, which is the way I've been doing it. So after you have taught the course, or after you've taught the class, or the unit maybe even, you would go back and ask yourself, how could this be improved? What could I do to change it? So these 6 things I've mentioned are kind of a model of the teaching learning process. A model is a way, not the only way, but is a way of conceptualizing what we're involved in. And what this is saying is that if you follow this conceptualization of the teaching process, we need to be concerned first with the objectives. Maybe not first. Maybe we'll get our objectives from the tests that we have given, particularly down here. I know oftentimes, even though this is listed in a 1, 2, 3, 4 order, I know in practice I frequently find that I will go to my test items and say, is this a good test item? Is this testing something I'd like to test? And if it is, then I will develop an objective from that test item. So it's it can be kind of a give and take. You don't necessarily have to sit down in isolation in a cubicle before anything ever starts and say, these are my objectives, and never change them. But, okay, then you have to be aware of where the students are, some sort of entering behavior. Then you have to be concerned with developing procedures or methods for working with the students at the level they're at, helping them step by step to reach the level you want them to attain, assessing their performance as you go along. This does not mean giving tests necessarily. Assessing their performance. Then modifying the procedures as you see that your procedures are ineffective, and then maybe finally changing the whole curriculum. So this is kind of one way that I have found useful. And of course, I've become very ingrained in this. I find that this oftentimes will aid me in being spontaneous. One of the criticisms of this type of system, or one criticism of the use of instructional objectives and such a formal approach as this, is that, where in the devil is there any room for spontaneity? And my response to that is that there is nothing in this system that says you can't be spontaneous or take advantage of something that may come up. And what I have found myself doing on occasion, particularly in seminars, when an issue comes up that I feel is important, I try to, on the spot, reformulate what the objectives might be. Where is this discussion going to lead? What do I want the students to be able to verbalize or write as a result of this discussion? Where are they now? At what point do I need to say something to give direction? And so I find that this has become very much a part of me. So I found that in even very spontaneous situations, I will use this model. Even though I may not have formal, elaborate objectives laid out to be followed, I use those usually. But it doesn't mean that I won't junk them. The whole argument, I think, for this kind of a model is not something to make individuals robots or to make them static or make them passive receivers. It's a way to help you plan. A way that will give you a way of going about laying out your plans. And then if you see something effective, if something comes up, and you say, well, I'm sorry, that's a good point, but we don't have time for that today, then that's not the fault of the system, that's the fault of the teacher. If, in fact, what was raised was a good point and is worthy of consideration, then why in the hell not junk what you're doing? If you're working with an individual on a particular problem, tutoring maybe, or with a small group, and you've laid out a plan today for the day, and you find that something else is very important, junk the plan that you've made. And if you are capable, try to formulate a new plan. It's capable only in the sense that I found that it was kind of hard for me to develop this skill that I have. And I'm not sure I always do it anyway. But develop a new plan.
Sometimes.
But if you have a system for planning, you can still use that system for planning, even though it may be spontaneous and immediate rather than formal and elaborate. Yes?
Don't you think sometimes it's not so much the plan that the teacher has, but maybe the teacher's insecurity on whatever the point may be that's brought up, that they want to put it away so they can have time to study it and bring it back?
Avoid it would be more than a typical reaction. Dr. Edwards and I were talking before he came in, and we're talking about questions and discussions, and I think he made the comment about the fact, well, all professors or all lecturers like to be interrupted. It gives them a chance to think and to pause and so forth. And my reply was that that may be true of him and I, but I'm not sure that's true of all professors or all teachers. I think many teachers are very insecure when it comes to being challenged or being questioned by students. I have this plan, and I know I can follow this plan, but if I deviate from this plan, I'm lost. Help! So it's, and what this is trying to do is to give you, I think, it can give you a way of dealing with these things that may come up.
Hey, Tom.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a guy who's selling something. He's got his sales pitch all arranged. And if you interrupt him, you blow his mind, and he gets all mixed up like a centipede does, or which foot comes back, or has to start all over.
Well, let's see now. You interrupted me at point 3BA.
Isn't an important part of performance assessment the amount of motivation you can draw from your students, particularly the younger ones? Even if they're not, cannot be big as far as the test. If they're motivated, if they're interested, if they're bringing in things, that should be very much taken into consideration. Even if they're not doing as well in the actual written test portion, if you've gotten their interest, you should really consider it as part of their giving of themselves.
Yeah, well, I see two. Let me respond to your question on two levels, or at least what I think I hear you say. I may have misunderstood you. But on one level is the motivational factor and the keeping the interest, which may be either because motivation may be affected by one's own self-concept. He's a failure, he can't succeed. It could be affected by the fact that this is just as boring as hell. Why the devil should I study this? It might be tied to the fact that, well, this has nothing at all to do with anything that's important to me. Yeah, I want to succeed in college, but how does this unit you're giving me help me accomplish that? So it's a matter of relevance. Those are all issues that, in one way or another, are related to motivation. The other thing is that a distinction can be made, and in psychology is made, between learning and performance. some of you who are in linguistics, the same distinction is very similar to the distinction, for example, Chomsky and so forth makes in terms of competency and it's performance, isn't it? Yeah. But learning is what an individual the extent to which his behavior has changed, or the potential has changed. I'll come back to that, or help clarify that in just a minute. The other aspect is performance, which is what he does. How well he does on the test. How well he does when you ask him something. Learning, you can never observe learning. Oh, I guess you could if you really wanted to stick a hypodermic needle in the brain and draw out the DNA and RNA and measure it or something. But learning is some mystical thing that at least as psychologists and teachers we are not able to touch or to look at. What we do observe is performance. How is the individual performing or doing or behaving? This gets back to this very important point that I think that, to me, maybe not to you, at the beginning, of we have to focus on behavior. Because the only thing we have to go by, the only way we have to measure or observe learning or help the student change is what he's actually performing. For a variety of reasons, performance and learning may be discrepant. In other words, a student may know something but may not be able to perform it. All of you, I'm sure, have had the experience of coming out of a test and saying, I knew more than that test tested. I was just, too uptight. Maybe I've had the experience of walking out of a test and having the answer come to me that I've been pondering for. Anxiety, pressure, a number of things can affect performance on a test that may reduce the level that the person is performing. Also, and I think a point that would be particularly likely in the students you're working with, is that we may phrase the question or the query or whatever in such a way that is not comprehensible to the student. He may be able to do the task that we're asking him to do, but he has not understood the communication. He has not understood what's being asked of him. So maybe if we took it back and rephrased it in a slightly different way, we would find that yes, he has in fact learned it. So all of these measures of performance and behavior have to be taken in the context that they may not be accurate representations of what a student has actually learned. Yes, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just going to raise the question. Is modification of behavior really a misnomer in describing the learning process? And if it is not a misnomer, then what is the relationship? Is it used quite loosely, or what is the relationship between that type of modification of behavior and say the type of modification of behavior that occurs in the learning process when a student who has not had discipline begins to develop discipline? In other words, if a person is essentially, when a person is learning something, he's simply mastering the laws that are governing the development of a specific process and learning how to apply those laws in a variety of situations. Now, is this in reality a modification in behavior?
Well, okay, yeah, it is in one way, although we as teachers may not be aware of it. Now, let me come back to that after saying a qualification. Behavior modification has become synonymous with operant conditioning or with Skinnerian conditioning. And when I use the term behavior modification or change in behavior, I want to in no way limit it to the types of behaviors that can be worked with in a Skinnerian or operant framework. But
particularly if it's synonymous with that, Skinnerian and operant behavior condition, to me, appears quite a long way away from the actual process of learning.
Okay, you used the example of discipline or self-discipline. That would be certainly a change in some sort of behavior. Let's say it would be evidenced by disruption of class. And I come in here today, and I notice that you're sitting very attentively, and you know, no sense disrupting the class and so forth. And I would make some sort of a conclusion that you're not a discipline problem. Whether you have learned that or not, maybe that is a problem that you've been working on. But I couldn't conclude that you have learned to be better disciplined since September 1, because I have no way of observing you as of September 1. All I have is a chance to observe you right now. And so I can't make any, it's not reasonable for me to say that you have learned this within a specified period of time. In other words, we need two observations, 2 points in time before we say that learning, before we can say that a change in behavior is reflection of learning. We can't make just single observations, which is what usually as teachers we do. We say, oh yes, the person has learned. But there can be many ways of got distracted by the cue I got. Good thing you held up 3 fingers, not to.
I forgot to tell you, Tom, everybody in this whole learning center has a dirty mind.
Good entering behavior. Let's come back to this either during the break individually, or I'll talk on it after the break, because they're signaling me that it's time for a break. I don't want to avoid the issue. It's an important one, I think. So why don't we take I don't know how long of a 5 minute, 10 minute?
Why not take a 10-minute break so we can rewind that?
Okay. Do you feel a slave of technology?
11:15.
having.
Yeah. Of forms of having
No, I
sex.
meant, you know, how do you think, I meant, why do you think they, like, a woman only has
Well, because I think what they're trying to say is a man can't understand a woman's anatomy, and a woman can't really understand a man's anatomy, and the thing you have to do is to be
yeah,
able
but
to
the
talk to
man
someone.
always comes.
Oh, no, not necessarily.
Come on.
Are you sure, Dennis?
Now? No, I'm serious. I'm serious.
Oh, Dennis.
Yeah, maybe I'm a weirdo. No, sometimes I get too involved in, worry whether, are you okay? All right? You having fun? Yeah? Oh, what happened to mine? No, really, you can't get involved that way. And I think, if you're not aware of
Yeah.
what's happening, you can say becoming impotent. And, boy, that's brutal to a man to think something like that's happening. Because a girl can just lay there. Nothing has to happen. I mean, a guy's got to have something happen before he can use it. And you just can't say, all right, let's go, man. It's like the old saying, as you get, to somebody who's got a lot of get up and go, as you get older, it doesn't get up as fast or go as far. That's brutal.
Where did you read that?
I got a birthday card, as a matter of fact.
How old
The
are you,
nail the guy
Dennis?
gave it to me. 22. I figure I got a couple more years just before I go over the hill. I got a question to put up. I'm surrounded by all the girls. Do you find the males you go out with? That's the problem. Gratify you? Or shouldn't I ask that? I shouldn't ask that.
I don't get for that.
It's on tape.
You said, do fine. Got it?
Does anybody? I ain't throwing a question up to anybody in particular. Whoever wants to respond to that one.
I think you have to be in the right mood. You know,
Oh, that's
that's all, the right mood. Or
The
else
right person.
nothing has the right person. You know?
At the right time.
If you just want to
Oh,
get it over
you just can't have sex
No.
for sex sake?
No, you just can't do
You
jump in
can't.
sex with anybody or
No,
anytime.
everybody know.
Oh, isn't that a way of learning how to know somebody? You talk to people to learn what they are.
Okay, I'm just gonna meet you and I'm sorry.
Well, I think you could learn a lot about people that way. You can learn whether they're sensitive. A guy grabs you behind like it's a ripe grapefruit, you're going to notice something about him. Yeah, but if he picks it up like it's an egg, it's going to break, then you say, oh, hey, this guy's one way as opposed to another. And, the way people kiss, some people come on you like a roaring elephant, And some people come up like a cat, very coy.
See, Dennis, there are different ways you can see. You can see by kissing, but you don't have to jump right in bed to find out what a person is like.
Well, I just use that as an example.
Oh, all right. No, I thought you said you had to go to bed with somebody.
Well, I said one way of finding out about somebody's to go to bed.
Yeah, well, I just think to see you can find out.
Yeah, but if you
can
jump
find out,
right in bed
like,
with
touch
them-
you. If I touch you, you can find out.
Dennis, if you go to bed...
Go ahead.
If you go to bed with somebody,
Yeah.
right away, right off the bat, then what else do you have to find out about that person?
Who the person is. And if you can't find out who the person is, the fantasy of going to bed with them is gone.
Wouldn't you rather find out about somebody first and then later on, if you like them, then go to bed with them?
No, what's the difference? Are you saying you first have to mentally know somebody before you can physically
No,
enjoy
you just
someone?
have to know.
That's how that juice, women, this is for pleasure, just using
Yeah, that's how.
That's what they
Yeah,
that you
that's
do.
just what you're saying.
I'm not.
Just what you're saying.
I'm finding out who somebody is by what they do instead of what they say. If the guy goes to bed with you and he reaches climax and says, sweetie, you haven't done it? Sorry. And you find out he's a very selfish person.
Yeah, well, then again, you might find out, okay, like, that's all he's interested in you for, is sex. He
Well,
might not
then-
never want to get to know you, as a person.
All right, so then, in other words, what you're saying is you're gonna feel used after that.
Yeah.
Well, you found out about somebody.
You found out that
Some
they
people,
want you.
some people use obligatory remarks.
What?
Obligatory.
That's your word.
Some people use obligatory remarks.
Yeah.
That last syllable is pronounced K-W-E with a long E.
Obligatory.
Sorry about
Is it?
obloquy.
Obloquy?
Obloquy.
Oh, obloquy remarks.
There you go.
Right,
With
so
that, I'll
it-
take mine.
It's a matter of how you perceive things. If you think verbal attack is not as bad as physical attack. Well,
Verbal attack, you can handle.
oh, that's not it's not necessarily true for everybody.
Or if you can handle verbal attack, how are you going to handle
Physical attack.
how are you going to handle physical attack when you're in bed with somebody?
Maybe you can do that better than you can verbal attack.
Yeah,
Maybe you can
that's
express
possible.
yourself.
Yeah.
You can't express yourself in words, but you can do it in talking. Like Denise said, if the guy grabs you behind like a ripe grapefruit, she's going to clobber him. That says a lot, boy. Says you grab my rear end again, I'll slam you.
All right, but do you have to grab first? I mean,
I use that as an example. You know.
Bob, what do you feel about this? You didn't say a word.
I feel left out. This is such a neat conversation. I was wishing I was here.
We were talking about this
yourself.
Friday.
Huh?
That's why.
Express myself.
Oh, you were? Men talk.
Huh? Men talk. Already you feel left out, huh?
No, I'm just talking about when you had a talk with women.
What would man talk be like?
Yeah, that'd be interesting. What do you think men talk is?
You know, talk about dirty
Men,
jokes.
no, not
Oh, yeah?
Wait, that's
I
good.
have good conversation. I'd rather talk to a man than a woman anytime. Because men have good conversation.
See, now that's strange because most women would rather talk with a man than they would with another woman. And it seems that most men would rather talk with men than other women.
Some of the time.
Some of the time.
Yeah.
I mean, to converse, not to do whatever else they want to do.
Dennis don't talk. Dennis doesn't talk.
I love being in the company of men. They talk about a lot of things.
Like what?
A lot of things. They don't talk about sex all the time, but most of the time.
Yeah, I heard women are pretty
So
bad
there's-
too.
Women are terrible.
Yeah.
Women, oh, I get so sick of that. But men, men are pretty cool.
Most of them.